just have to treat them fairly. We can't be deceptive and all of that. But that is our obligation to buyers. Our obligation to sellers is get them the most money for their best interests.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing, man?
I said the reason we didn't send you the link is because American links don't work in Australia. I'm joking. It was a joke.
Taking the piss.
It was a joke.
I'm sitting there going, really? Nah, he's having to lend me the bugger.
What's up, man?
Good to see you, man. Been too long, brother. But you know what? It doesn't feel like it's been too long. It's too long since we've done anything other than swap messages. But every time I'm watching you on video, man, it's like, yeah, Tristan gets it. And isn't it funny how communication isn't one-on-one, and yet there's still a sense of feeling it when you communicate. I suppose when you communicate the way you do to the camera, it's like you're talking to your audience member. It's not like, it's not like you're broadcasting on the news. You know what I mean? Like,
you're right,
that's
man.
probably why.
Even though it looks like it's a one-to-many, it really is a one-to-one communication.
Correct. Yeah, but it's funny, man. You mentioned that, and we're not live yet, are we? Or are we?
Yeah, we are.
It's all part of the training. Cool, brother. Well, I tell you, this is a good point. Because I do the same thing as you do. I communicate to that camera as if it's one of my friends, like I'm doing with you now. And I do that with everything. So I was at an airport not so long back, and this guy comes up to me, Glenn, man, it's so good to see you. Man, that thing we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, blah, 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 blah. And I had my son with me, right? My 13-year-old son, he was at the time. And as I walked away, we had this good communication. How's biz? He told me about this thing that he was doing that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. I'd never spoken to the man. We were on a video. He was on a video where I was talking to 100 agents. And yet the way he communicated with me was that thing we were talking about, I went and did, and he wanted to share with me his results, as if I was having a one-on-one with him, but I wasn't. But because of that manner of communicating one-to-many as if one-to-one, it's a really cool principle for building a relationship with an audience, man. And you do it better than anyone I've ever seen, brother. So
I appreciate that, man. Well, look, it's been a while since I saw you. For those of those people listening in, you're from Australia.
They can't tell,
you're
mate,
like
the audio.
Well, you may be living here, but you're not. You're living down under. It's 8 a.m. I think over there, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And you've been doing real estate on a coaching level for a long time. You're a recognizable person over there, and you do a very good job. We go back a long time. And can you tell people exactly what you do and how you got into real estate over there? And then we'll get into the details.
Yeah. The lightning fast version is got in the industry, hated prospecting, cold calls, then studied every marketing coach, primarily USA guys, because down in Australia, they didn't have anyone to teach me how to get a seller to call me, so I didn't have to cold call 100 people in the area to get one begrudging maybe, where they go, oh, well, if you must come around and give me an opinion of what my home's worth, I'll allow you to. Like, imagine going from that level of like begging for appraisal opportunities. That's what we call like a market opinion. Just the first step in the process is that. And we go from begging for those. Then when we find someone who's selling, trying to reposition ourselves as an authority who's worth $15,000 for the transaction, that formula I despised. So I went and figured out, how do I get that one person to call me so I don't have to call them? And for the last 15 years, I've been honing, reinventing, taking those principles from offline primarily to half offline, half social media, now to primarily online with a little bit of printed paper and ink, newspapers, printed collateral, etc. But even though the media might have twisted and changed over the course of the last 15 years, the principles have not. And that is, position yourself as an expert authority in your area, that when the marketplace thinks real estate, they think you, so that 1 in 100 people who might potentially need something in the real estate space, they instantly think of your name, your face, and they know how to contact you, so that you don't have to go to the marketplace like a beggar and then try and flip the switch and say you're an expert. So,
Yeah.
and of course, I met Tristan some years ago. I was honored when he invited me to come over to Lab Coat Live in San Diego. I've had him speak at a couple of our events, along with his partner Nick Baldwin. And I just have one of the highest compliments I ever got. This summarizes the Glenn Twiddle story, because we're going to get into how to help now. This summarizes when Nick and Tristan said to me over in San Diego, they had stars of $1 Million listing there. They had Aaron Brockovich was headline speaker. Amazing event. I met some really talented folk there that I still look at to this day in terms of educators. Sharon, genius. The Facebook guys. There was a lineup that I was honored to just be amongst. But when Tristan and Nick at that event said that if you want to sort of sum up Glenn, he's the illegitimate love child of Gary Vaynerchuk and Tom Ferry, I think throw in a bit of Dan Kennedy, the marketing legend, and that's probably about how to describe me. But when those guys said across between Tom Ferry and Gary V, I'm like, I'll take that, man. I'll take that.
That's very true, man. So look, we're in an interesting world right now. Obviously, it's a proposed settlement. Nothing's been officially signed. So the main two challenges that we're seeing is that the commission to the buyer's agent isn't going to be allowed to be placed on the MLS, right? So it's no longer going to be there. And then it's up in the air as to who's going to pay for it, because we can still negotiate it with the seller and the seller can still pay for it. But we're seeing is now the buyer is saying, well, do I have to pay for it? And if so, how does that work? Because this is just starting to come out. So that means our lending world still hasn't figured out whether or not it works like in Australia, where we can put it into the loan, to the financing. So we're in the middle there. And then the other piece to this is now every single buyer that we work with has to have a buyer broker agreement signed before we show them property.
So that wasn't the case historically.
No.
Okay, that's
You're
interesting.
like, dude, we've been doing it like this for a long time.
Yeah.
So
So I guess half of this conversation will be Tristan bringing me up to speed with the nuances of who incurs a fiduciary obligation, what paperwork historically has been signed, and all of that. So I've watched a few of Tristan's philosophical takes on it, and we're so in alignment with that. I love it. So there'll be so you got to forgive me, guys, that Tristan's going to bring me up to speed a little bit, but I do get the sense that the way we've been doing it will be a way, potentially not the only way, but a way for some agents over there to move forward.
You got it.
So
definitely take us through. Now, if I'm a buyer in Australia, do I go through a buyer's agent? Do I go directly to the seller? And what are the fees involved using a real estate agent for the buyer?
Yeah. So let me give you the overview of how real estate is typically transacted here, and the quick version of the paperwork and the written agreements of who signs up with whom and who incurs. And I think this is where the country, whoever the body is that took this class action is coming from, is who incurs the fiduciary obligation to represent who. And so, because that's the big thing, that duty of care at law, at least here in Australia, and I assume, because I have heard you use the term fiduciary obligation, and I'm glad, because one thing I didn't want to get in the way of this conversation is terms that we use. We don't even use the term broker. Our brokers over here are called principal licensees. So they're the effective business owner. They're the one who actually has the relationship with the seller at law. And then salespeople who work for that broker, we call it principal licensee, are like an arm and an extension of that broker, of that principal licensee.
Yeah, it's the same. That actually is the same here.
Same? Cool. So when you're a buyer and you want to buy a piece of real estate, there is still the legal mechanism to engage a buyer's agent. So we still have that, where you sign a agency agreement to represent the buyer to go and source properties. So the fiduciary obligation to that buyer is to source the property at the lowest possible price as the fiduciary representative of that buyer. So that's here, but it probably occurs 1 in 500 transactions, right? Less than 1% of transactions that are affected in residential mum and dad type real estate here in Australia, which is primarily what most real estate agents play in. There's not too much, there is commercial, of course, but 40,000 real estate agents here in Australia, as opposed to maybe 400,000 in the States. For a rule of thumb, I always say is just stick a 0 on everything that we do to talk to my US friends. And
Dude,
so, because
you
I've
know
heard there's
how-
a million. Yeah, I've heard there's a
a lot
million
more-
plus. But active ones, Tristan. I'm not talking about the guy who's got the
yeah.
license and is waiting tables. I'm talking about, those who are doing it.
Full on. Got you.
Yeah. And so say it's 400,000, so we got 40,000. Like it would be less than 1% that do, commercial real estate. Just everyone gets in, gets their license and does residential mum and dad real estate. So for those 99% of them, even though the facility is to have a buyer's agent get remunerated by the buyer, a seller's agent, the way you do it, be remunerated by the seller. And now I did do some investigating because I've only coached one buyer's agent historically. So I rang him and then I talked to another couple just to make sure his way of doing business was the norm. So our buyer's agents are remunerated separate to the proceeds and things. Sometimes they do it in installments. So there'll be an engagement fee, potentially a retainer on a weekly basis. And then when a sale is affected, those initial fees, either initial engagement fees or retainers in an ongoing way, do go against the commission and pay it back kind of thing. But if there is no sale that happens, those upfront fees are collected and retained by the buyer's agent who is representing the buyer. So
That's an interesting way. It's like, we're taking it up front, we're charging, and then as soon as we close over here, then it's paid off.
It all gets deducted,
deducted. That's interesting. I like that. Now,
but so few do it that way, Tristan, and that doesn't help your, like, say it's 2% of a $400,000 property. That's still
very little.
That's still what is that? Is that 10 grand?
Dude, that's tiny. It looks at 8 grand if it's 2% of 400.
Okay, so and again, the commissions, we sort of are around the 1 to 3% on the buyer's agent side, 2 to 3%, 1.5 to 3% on the seller's side. That's a typical agency fee with a median price of around $500,000.
Is that how it typically works every time? So there's always for the most part, a buyer's agent involved?
No, there's never a buyer's agent. That's what I'm saying. What I just described to you legally happens less than 1% of transactions in Australia. So it's almost not worth talking about, but it is there at law. It is there at law and it does happen.
So then typically, if I was going to go buy in Australia, my friend Dan is going to actually go buy in Australia.
Cool. Get him to call me.
He's from Australia. I'll connect him to you. Wait, what part of Australia are you in?
But I've got clients all over the country. So even though, and it is getting down to the fiduciary obligation, he shouldn't buy any of my clients' listings because they'll get him to pay top dollar. He should talk to my clients and friends and buy through one of their competitors who they identify as crap so he can get a good deal. You know what I mean?
Sounds like a broken system.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is my clients have a fiduciary obligation that they will honor to get top dollar for their seller. So your buyer shouldn't buy against my clients as negotiators because they're good. I've got a friendship with you. I don't want your friend to pay too much. 7 out of 10 real estate agents here in Australia will be underskilled and your friend will out negotiate them. Buy through one of them. Me and Naomi just did. We bought a house. Literally, we paid about 15% less for that home. And without going into the specifics, worth probably mid 6s, 7. We paid, let's say, mid 5s because we were negotiating against an absolute novice and we paid far less than we would have. All that person would have had to do is tell us the price. When we said, what do you reckon the owners will accept? If she'd have just said a number, we would have paid it. But her way of communicating that, we paid 15%, like nearly 100 grand less than we should have.
So I want you to answer this, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of how to start this. But if you just did this, what do you think would have benefited the seller more than having you represented by an actual buyer's agent? Or
no, I was a better negotiator than any buyer's agent would be.
Okay, so then what was the problem? Why did you end up negotiating less? Where was the problem?
The agent said, when we asked how much do you think the owners will accept, here was some language before we were at contract, while we were expressing serious interest that we were going to put in an offer. Here was her words, and I quote, Oh, thank God you guys came along and really saw through some of the visual shortfalls of this property. Geez, I'm really grateful. She expressed gratitude and told me firsthand we were the only buyers within a country mile who were interested in this property. Our offer instantly went down to bottom dollar, and then she went to her sellers and said, "This is all we got. Please accept it." Unbelievable.
Got it. So no negotiation, no back and forth.
No.
Interesting. We find that over here, this is the reason that some states don't have dual agency because of that reason, meaning the listing agent can't represent the seller and the buyer in some
Oh,
states.
for sure. Yeah, and that's certainly one of the things when I saw, because I heard some folk, I won't name names because I don't want to add any trouble if they might be, but they use the term double ending,
Yeah.
right, where they get both. Now, they told me they waived conflict or whatever language they used, that both buyer and seller acknowledged it, thus keeping them out of legal dramas. But there's still, without that disclosure, how can you have a fiduciary obligation to both sides of a transaction with opposing best interests at heart,
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge we're facing here because the way the media is portraying it, and you help me, Glenn, but the way that they're portraying it is saying, well, now the buyers can circumvent the buyer's agent in some cases and just go directly to the listing agent.
Which they
And
do in every case over here, virtually.
yeah, we've seen that here too, right? We get calls all the time in similar situations. But as far as commission, because this is the norm, you said 98% about
Most
all
of our
all
buyers
transactions.
do not have because most Aussies, for whatever reason, and it is just a cultural acceptance by both the buying and the selling public, most Aussies credit themselves with enough negotiating skill and ability that they don't need to pay 1 to 3% of the transaction fee in order to have themselves represented by someone trained to do this. Now, I'm not even saying that in most cases that a good negotiator couldn't do for a member of the public what me and Naomi did for ourselves with that lesser skilled selling agent. They absolutely could, because imagine if someone did represent us, saved us over $100,000 in our purchase price, charged us $8,000 to do so. Happy Glenn, happy client, very, very acceptable transaction, but it just doesn't happen in most of the time because most buyers, they see a property they like, they inquire with the real estate agent. The real estate agent they're not overtly required to say to every buyer that comes to inspect a property. Now, you do realize I represent the seller and my job is to turn you upside down and squeeze you for your last dollar because I've incurred a fiduciary obligation. They don't say that. They just treat those buyers with courtesy, honesty, fairness and respect. And in our law, it says honesty, fairness, honesty, and maybe it's respect or something. But there's 3 things that we just have to treat them fairly. We can't be deceptive and all of that. But that is our obligation to buyers. Our obligation to sellers is get them the most money for their best interests. That's it.
Got it. That makes sense. So you have a contract with it. So then what is the commission amount typically charged on the listing side when you take the listing?
It's 1.5% for the lesser skilled agents, 3% for the good ones. Now, I do want to sort of bring to your, because I've got a couple of solutions for you, for your guys, if everything seems to be along the right lines of how we've done business. And look, we've got agents that do millions of dollars in commissions, like millions, multi-million dollar agents. We top out at about the 8 million for one agent. Like for an agent is our best. I don't think they quite clip the 10 million. No matter really how big their team, when there's one solo agent, even if they've got not other agents, but other support staff. Like you might have met, at various events of ours or something. There's one of my clients called Chris Gilmore. He went from 150,000 in commission when he met me to $1.5 million when we worked for about 5 years together. We really as monthly, coaching clients and all of that. He's now since gone on because you spend 5 years with me, you know everything I know. So he's gone on and built a team that's doing about 4 million, but he's got 8 staff doing 90% of the work. It's almost like, not that he's ever read the book, but I read it and I sort of helped him apply some of these things. That book by Gary Keller, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, first book I ever read. And you know how he talks about you build a team and you build experts, so you're just the puppeteer pulling the strings. Well, Chris is one level below what Gary Keller talks about at the ideal, where he
Uh,
does nothing but listing presentations. He's got staff to do everything else, but those staff are working on behalf of him. They're not a listing and selling entity in their own right. They are his employees. And
Okay.
so,
So
yeah. So
on
he
the
gets 3%. He gets
he
3%.
gets 3%, and then that also wraps in the buyers that they come in. They don't charge an extra fee for representing them.
No, well, they don't represent them, and that's the key. They treat them fairly, honestly, and respectfully. They help them figure out the paperwork, and they get their offer on a written contractual offer of sale and all of that. So they treat them with honesty and fairness and, transparency and all of those things, but they do not represent them. And that's the key.
That is the key.
Fiduciary obligation is to seller and the buyer, whilst they are treated with friendliness, courteousness, and respect, etc., they are, for the purposes of that negotiation, they are on the other side of the negotiating table, not at our side of the table.
Got it. All right. So now you kind of understand where we're at. There's representation on both sides.
Yeah.
On our end. The way that the media has portrayed the real estate agent or the industry as a whole over the last few days is just saying there's no more 6% commission. There never was, right? It's always been negotiable. And now you're finding that we're getting calls left and right to get a better understanding of how this is going to work. The point is nobody knows yet, because like I said, it hasn't
Still up in
even
the air a
gone
little bit.
through, right?
Yeah.
So it's just in the settlement phase.
Hmm.
What are some of the recommendations that you've seen with your world as far as us being able to apply some of these?
Betty's just asked if Australia requires lawyers for
Yeah.
real estate transactions.
Great question.
Absolutely. So whether it's a full law firm, and really the full law firms don't charge full law firm fees. They know they couldn't get away with it. So they charge very reasonable fees to transact on properties. When I say reasonable, the legals might be between $500 and $1,500 to pay for the lawyer's representation. In some states, they call them a settlement agent, so they're almost a pseudo lawyer. There's still legal minds in there, but they've figured out a way to do it without a fully blown $500 an hour Harvey Specter on the deal. I may be showing my age, talk about Harvey Specter or Boston Legal, bloody Denny Crane and stuff. I am showing my age. Geez, I'm only half dressed, Tristan. To answer, it was a Rebecca, to answer Rebecca's question.
Yeah.
They do require, so there are legals in it. That does protect the buyers from making a faux pas, or the real estate agents from maybe incorrectly filling out the contract. But that's part of really our licensing, is learning how to fill out the contracts, because we take a live contract and we get that signed back and forth between buyers and sellers. Then it gets submitted to the legal people.
Got it. So we in essence, when the buyer comes in and says, I like this home, I'd like to offer this much, and that falls on us. We're now sending the paperwork back and forth between both parties.
Yeah, well, we do that, but the other party isn't a represented real estate agent. They're the buyer.
Got it. So you go directly to the buyer. Okay, so who's all involved in a transaction? You've got the listing agent, you've got an attorney now for the transaction.
That represents the listing agent.
Okay. And then who else do you have involved here?
A buyer and a buyer's attorney, let's say. They each pay maybe between $500 and $1,500. So only $1,000 isn't here. Buyer gets represented by a lawyer for the purposes of the paperwork. It's after the negotiation is done.
It's like a flat fee. It's like saying.
Yeah, it is a flat fee in most cases. Yes.
Which has been, that, by the way, that has been thrown around over on this end. One of the opportunities that we're seeing some companies talk about is saying, well, why not have a flat fee servicing all of the buyers and saying, hey, we'll do the paperwork for you for $500 or $1,000.
Exactly how it's done here. But that lawyer does incur the fiduciary obligation to represent the buyer from a legal perspective to make sure they're not entering into an unfair contract and all of those things. But the contracts are standardized anyway. We use the same contracts that were composed by the law societies over here to be fair and, in fact, even a little bit biased in protecting the buyer's best interest, a little bit protective of the buyer's side, but we use those standard contracts in almost all cases.
I like that. All right. Some questions for you. By the way, if you have questions, throw them in the chat.
Let me run you through these couple of solutions that I kind of formulated in my head, and let's see if they might be helpful. So one of the things, just like our society, our whole buyer and seller dynamics, they're trained to, if they saw a 6% commission from an agent, selling agent, they'd instantly freak out and think, that's not what agents charge, right? And similarly, the buyers are trained just to respond to properties. Like you said, happens from time to time with you guys. Buyers come straight to you. And so our people are trained in a certain way, as are yours. Even though you're saying there's some people that are going to listen to the media and say, oh, 6%'s over. It was never there. I can guarantee you that there's a whole lot of people who aren't watching that still think a real estate transaction costs 6%. So here's the first thing that I might suggest. If you said to your sellers, and I note that you're recording this, so please review this, slow it down, chop it out, get the script, get the dialogue, tweak it and UIze it, make it your own, and then figure out how to deploy it. So it might be something like this. So Tristan, you're my seller now. Tristan, okay. Thanks for choosing us, to represent you in this. I understand there's a lot of choices out there, so I'm honored that you've chosen to leave the marketing and the negotiation of this property to us. With regards to our fees, we want to make sure that you get the best outcome at the end of the day and get the most money in your pocket, to the tune of, if a typical property of, say, $500,000, if there's a bit of leeway that with, if you sell it yourself, there might be a 5% discount that a buyer might enjoy at your expense because of the lack of a marketing and negotiation system, but then you save your fee. So there might be 5 to 10% either way, in either direction, in terms of if you get the negotiation, the marketing and all of that right, a 10% premium on what this house is potentially worth, and a 5% to 10% discount if you've got to give it away based on price alone. So I'm honored that you've chosen us. And in order, surely that's definitely what you're after though, yeah? The most money in your pocket after all of that is said and done. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. Because we want them to get a bunch of yeses, yeah? So we get a bunch of yeses along those lines. Then we say, so the way we do that, Tristan, is we're positioned in the marketplace a little differently than a typical real estate agency. So what you're engaging me to do is to market on your behalf to all of the buying public, get the property in front of as many eyeballs as possible, because we've got a formula that turns eyeballs into foot traffic at an open house. Multiple people falling in love with this property at that open house leads with our negotiation system, this unique negotiation system that we've put together to get a premium price for you by having multiple people fall in love with that property, getting competitiveness against each other, thus getting you a premium outcome for you. And the way we do that is not only do we market to get the most eyeballs to get those buyers in, but we work with a selection of the best agents in the area, and we only choose the good ones who are, because when we work with another agent, they, along with me, have a legal responsibility to get the most money possible for you. Like, think about this, the agents that I work with that you've never met, they have the same legal responsibility to represent you as I do. And we get the most money possible out of their buyer. If their buyer happens to be the one that is offering the most money, myself and my colleague from another office, and I've got a network of these guys in other offices, all the best agents in the area. And we work together to get you a premium price. So whether the highest price buyer that's out there, that emotional buyer who is moving to Florida from LA, they're chasing Ben Shapiro over to Florida, or they're chasing Joe Rogan down to wherever Joe ended up, Austin or whatever, right? Yeah. So that person who is moving to Austin needs to buy in Austin. They've missed out on 4 or 5 properties because everyone's moving to Austin, and they want to live near the comedy club because they're an up and coming standard, whatever. We want to find that guy that is emotionally wanting to buy that property and have him know that there are other buyers that are wanting that property. Thus, we drive him to pay a premium for your property. And me and the agent you've never met are working on your behalf. If that buyer is the one, I've never met that buyer until the negotiation starts. But me and that other agent represent you again. Now, and what I'm sort of saying there is, whether it's with one of my network of referral specialists that is that emotional buyer, whether it's the buyer that comes to us directly through our advertising, which again, as you've seen, that's why you called me in, because you see me everywhere marketing properties. And that does result in the lion's share of our buyer inquiry that comes in. But we don't want to discount the other agents. If they happen to be working with a buyer that this property, your property, suits perfectly, Of course they're welcome to bring them in, and we remunerate them and it costs you nothing more. So what that relationship is called over here, a conjuncting relationship, where we work in conjunction with the sellers, with the other agents on behalf of the sellers. Now, typically, historically, when I owned my company, we had a no questions asked 50-50 conjuncting policy, meaning I'd list them at say 2.5%, and another agent would come in and we'd go 1.25% each. Now, you can change the percentage once it's set with the sellers. The way it used to be, it would be written, the percentage with which we will conjunct with other agents would be written on our agency agreement. I saw some things in the lab coat where people were saying, oh, what about if you've got a friend and you offer him a 50-50, but you've got an agent that you don't like, so you offer him an 80-20. My recommendation is have a standard split. That no matter who it is, because the thing is, Tristan, when you get good at marketing properties direct to consumers, I saw David Knox say this to me 20 years ago, so this isn't a new concept even over there. When you market properties effectively to consumers, you're going to get buyers come to you direct, treat them with fairness, honesty, and professionalism. They will be your primary, because think about it. If there's a buyer sitting on another agent's database, if they've been on there for a period of time, they're not the emotional buyer that needs to move this week. You need your marketing direct to consumers to put these properties in front of those buyers that are moving next week and will buy next week, because they're the ones that are going to pay the 10% premium. And if you're going to honor the fiduciary obligation that you incur at law, you can't have preference of your friend who you'll pay 50% or whatever if the guy who you don't like has got a buyer that will pay more. But in reality, the amount of times we conjuncted was less than 1 in 10 times. So 9 out of 10 times, we got the buyer direct. So we got all of that 3% commission. Well, 2.5% was our standard. That's what we charge. We got all of the commission 9 out of 10 times. But the unique selling proposition of being able to say to a seller, we'll work with all of the other agents, and not only all of the other agents. We've hand select. It's almost like, Tristan, we haven't had an MLS in this country since I've been in real estate. There was one back in the 80s, I'm told. I've never been, but I made my own informal MLS with all of the best agents in my area. That whenever I would get a listing,
like New York,
I would send it to my colleagues. And then, so it was an informal MLS. They knew the manner with which we conjuncted, and they were happy to do it because they'd just throw me buyers. I remember one guy, I'd done a few conjunctions with him over the course of years. And one time we had a buyer of his booked, and something come up and couldn't attend the appointment. So he just sent the buyer. He did no work other than sent the buyer to this appointment. I did everything, and I sent him a $4,000 commission check for doing none of the work.
Wow.
Right? He never came to another buyer inspection with me again. He just sent me his buyers. And if ever any of them were the buyer, I'd send him $4,000. It was a beautiful
question about that. There's so multiple questions here. Let's go like
I've crammed a lot in, brother.
So there's no MLS. So over here, we're also hearing rumors as NAR is having a challenge. Some MLSs may pull out, some stay, right? But there are also some brokerages, the big ones, are also talking about saying, well, why don't we create our own system where we can show what percentage we're paying to the buyers? Now, then what happens is you take this one place where we can go to find properties, and now there's a whole bunch of different ones, little ones, like what you're saying, hey, you created your own. Is there a disadvantage in your country where I would go to some smaller brokerage, put up my listing in a smaller brokerage, and now it doesn't get the same representation so other agents can see it? Then I don't have the same foot traffic.
Yeah. What was here's the thing. Your answer is direct consumer advertising. We've been a bit spoilt over here in Australia. We had 3 or 4 years when I first got in the industry where I mastered direct consumer advertising. Then this website called realestate.com.au really took over, and it became almost the MLS countrywide, meaning
is that
Realtor.com
or no?
I guess, yeah, it's same as Realtor.com, or what's the other one you've got where all the properties go to be advertised?
Oh, that's Zillow.
Zillow, yeah. So we've got one of them, right? And that's where the buyers go. We train buyers to go to realestate.com. Prior to that, we had to go to the radio, TV, newspaper, magazines, primarily newspapers and magazines were the primary real estate media for exposure of properties to buyers. And so in the ensuing 15 years, agents over here have lost the ability to market direct to consumers. Their ability to promote properties on Facebook for the most part, and I have seen that a fair bit. I did some study, man, when I was doing some work with Glenn Cortino in Beverly Hills. I was over there to interview Josh Altman, Matt Altman, and Josh Flagg. Now that they're buddies, Tristan, I know we talked about this years ago. When Altman and Flagg hated each other, Flagg wouldn't even take my calls. But then when they got to be besties, I brought Josh Flagg out to Australia as well, now that they're friends. So I brought Altman's and Flagg. So it was pretty cool. But I was over there and I was talking to Glenn Cortino, who's Beverly Hills real estate agent. He knows the Altmans and he's great example of an Aussie real estate agent. He's wonderful. And so, we were so where we go. What your question was, you asked about, is there a disadvantage? And I was, lost my train of thought. As soon as I drop Altman, he fires my brain.
Small brokerage.
Yeah, is there a disadvantage?
And because you guys have no MLS, it's
so realestate.com. That's our biggest thing.
So hold on, Glenn, because here's the other fear we have, right? As a big group of agents. If you're telling me that realestate.com now has like the monopoly on where everyone goes and puts their website, where properties on
listings, correct.
I mean, we're at the cusp of something like that happening even more, not just Zillow, but Redfin or other sites. Tell me, I need to understand the realestate.com thing. Do they charge agents an extra fee or something? How does that business model work?
It started off as free. Or subscription. You pay your subscription, you put all your properties up, and they all go there. They are geniuses, Tristan. Because as soon as we got the buying public addicted to this one portal, this one monopoly, they can now charge what they want. They're now a $6 billion company. And it was started off by a guy very early in the internet days, as the legend goes, who happened to be the first one who just registered www.realestate.com.au as a URL and built a $6 billion company. And that was $6 billion 10 years ago, so it's probably more. So yes, they charge, and boy, oh boy, are they pushing that price point through the roof.
Do they send, so it works the same way as here, that people, the consumer, they go over there and they like a property, and then the appointment goes over to the agent, and then the agent pays a certain amount monthly or
okay. So, but now what happened was it went from a monthly subscription model with all you can list to effectively, and they did this by having premium upgrades, but now because virtually all the other agents do the premium upgrade, it's become a $1,000 to $2,000 per listing model, per listing. So you have to get, and this is another concept.
It's a piece of the commission.
And there's the other thing. It brings up another concept called seller paid advertising. Vendor is the seller, the owner contributing to the advertising expenses up front, as opposed to it being incurred by the agent and thus being part of the risk reward proposition. It's one of the differences that justifies this 6% business.
Yeah.
Our sellers pay a commission, but they pay for advertising.
That's the other piece that I was getting to, because we talked about this before, which was if I'm an Australian listing agent, I go there, I get it at, let's say, the max, 3%. But the seller is paying for the marketing.
Correct.
And how much typically is that?
I used to have a rule of thumb, 1% of the value of the property, but that was when we needed very expensive newspaper and magazine print collateral that was crazy. So for a $400,000 property, we'd attempt to get $4,000, etc. And rarely did we get it. We'd accept $1,500 to $2,000. Sometimes $500 would do a job, but that'd be more classified ads than pictorials, etc. So 1% used to be a good rule of thumb. For 10 years, it could be a fraction of that because of the advent of the low-cost buyer acquisition of realestate.com. Now it's creeping back up, that on a $500,000 property, you've got to probably start at $3,000 to really start to make an impact, because $1,500 of that is going to go to this realestate.com.au. Then you need your signboard, your invites to the open for inspections, whether it's flyer drops, heaven forbid, Facebook advertising. Now, and that's what I was getting at before when I talked about when I was in Beverly Hills in LA last time I was there, and it was only a year and a half ago. The skill level that I saw of agents promoting their listings on social media was abysmal. And this is from LA real estate agents, because I was doing a deep dive in the opposition of Flag, and they were the Douglas Elliman. I think Joshua might have just changed to Compass, didn't he? But yeah, the Altmans and Flag and all of that, they were all with Douglas Elliman. But Glenn Cortino was with Harcourts, the same brokerage as Bob, the great man Bob Wolf, who I'm just still in love with to this day. Got the biggest man crush ever on Bob Wolf. So I was there looking at their competitors.
Yeah.
And mate, I tell you, what was your Facebook guy that I met a couple of years ago? Tim or Tom? Genius.
Scott Shapiro, Facebook guy.
I do know Scott. I go, who's the other guy? Travis Tom. Those agents have not been listening to Travis. They are not advertising. They haven't been to Lab Coat Live. They aren't advertising their properties well, direct to consumer. So, and I think that's the art that might have been lost.
I have a question then. So in total, it sounds like the seller is paying 4%.
Let's say, they're not always getting the 1%. Yeah. Like say 600, and certainly as our property prices have had a bump since COVID, many places across the country just doubled.
I know, I saw that.
They're not getting $8,000 in an $800,000 property, but they might be getting 3, 4.
Has anybody in your world ever gone in and said, "Hey, don't worry about the marketing, I'll handle it, and this is my charge"?
Yeah, often though that's added at the end and recouped. So it's almost like we're loaning the seller the advertising dollars, which again, and this is another legal thing, and I hate being boring like this, but what that does is the unfortunate thing, there are some legal experts, no one's ever gone down for this legally, but there are some legal experts that say that the agent incurring that financial interest where they only recoup their advertising expenditure upon the property settling gives them a conflicting interest to get that property sold at any price, thus being in conflict with the fiduciary obligation that they've incurred to get the most. Because now they've got some skin in the game, you know what I'm saying? So the answer is yes, they have, but that. So that's why it's preferable to get that seller to dip their hand in the pocket up front.
We've got about 5 minutes, but I have a really good question for you because Betty brought it up again. Betty, great questions. How does a listing agent handle multiple buyers?
We love that, Tristan. That multiple offers is my it's my kryptonite to be the best the Pareto principle, whatever it is that Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about. We talk about the 80-20 rule. The 20% of negotiating skills that gets you 80% of the result of the best negotiator on planet Earth is learning an effective multiple offers, multiple buyers situation. So that script, I do go through an hour training in my training, and I did put together a link for you guys, for your guys, Tristan, and I'll show it in a moment if you like, where they'll get that hour-long training along with my life's work, everything I've ever done, and I got Naomi to mark it down, much to her, she didn't want to do it, because I took the price down to 47 AU, which is like 31 US, and we sell it here discounted from 10 grand down to 1 grand. And when she said I discounted it down to like $30 US, she was mad, but she did it, right? So, but the quick version of that is for Betty. I love it, Betty. Thank you. We go to each buyer. Say I've got 4 people interested in the property. I go to Tristan, who's one of them. I say, Tristan, look, thanks for wanting to buy the property. I love that your kids had already picked out their bedrooms at the open house on Saturday. Mate, congrats. Let me see if I can get this for you. I do need you to sign this piece of paperwork that just says you are we're going to take all of the offers. I need this to be your best offer because I've got some of my colleagues who are signing up other offers. And this piece of paper is just a Real Estate Institute of Queensland official form. It's important that I say official. So they are signing something that I have told them, I need your best offer right now. Because look, I've got some other agents, Tristan. I'm telling you, I got this one guy. He's out of the military. He is so disciplined. He's better at this than me, right? He's out there, has a reputation within our office of getting outlandish prices. So I just need you to know that you're up against other buyers. So I need this to be the most you'll pay for this property. Fair enough.
Dude, here, let me pause you. That sounds terrible for the buyers.
It is. I don't have an obligation to the buyers.
That sounds like an absolute disaster for the buyers.
It is when they're up against someone who can say that. Like, you notice how friendly I was saying it.
Yeah,
You
of
notice
course.
how
But
I'm
but
not being, but I am making no mistake that I'm saying, Tristan, my representation is to the seller, and so if that other offer is more than the one that you're willing to pay, I need to
yeah,
be okay that you're not mad at me for not sort of saying. I mean, if say in the future, because what that other buyer, now this is part of the dialogue, and note how, and you'll be mad because it is against the buyer to get them to pay more money, which is my legal responsibility, but it's under
yeah.
the guise of friendliness, right? So Tristan, what that other buyer potentially might be paying, it'll be public record in about 2 or 3 months. And if you see that that amount was, say, $5,000 more, because I don't know what he's doing at the moment. He's signing it up now as we speak. That
Yeah.
anonymity is important, by the way, just breaking role play.
Terrible.
If it turns out 3 months from now, you see it was $5,000 more and you missed out by like a cup of coffee a day,
Yeah.
are you going to be mad that you kind of didn't have a chance to at least match it? You know? And look at my body language. I'm kind of doing that. If I see you even do that subtle little nod that you did then, right? Because I'm watching you, because I know what I'm asking. I've asked it 1,000 times. When you nod even subtly like that, I'm going to go, so mate, look, maybe give me that 5,000. Let me see if I can get this for you. Right? So I'm having them negotiating against their own desire to own the property and a hypothetical fear of missing out. And I'm getting you, and then I'll jokingly say, so Tristan, thank you for that 5,000, mate. I'm going to try and get this for you, but I do need to keep asking this to you until you get mad at me and you take that chair that you're sitting on, you throw it at the wall and you say, for $1 more, your military mate can choke on it, right? So I'm jokingly saying, are we at that point? One guy, Tristan, I'll finish on this. I said to a guy, we're sitting there at a bar signing it up, right? Now we'd only had one drink, so we weren't in trouble legally. I wouldn't sign up a drunk guy. We'd had one to drink, but I motioned to his wallet because we had a good rapport and I saw that there was at least one $50 note in there. I motioned to his wallet and I said, may I? And he said, yeah. I got $152 out of his wallet, 152, and I said, let's put this on the offer. It just might be the difference maker. What do you think? And he laughed and said, righto. So I picked his pocket for his last $152 legally, almost as a joke. But then when I went back to the seller, and I said, this was the negotiation process to get you the last penny in his pocket, you know? So you're right. It is, mate, everything is for the benefit of the seller. That's why we can't double end over here. There is no way I'm going to do I was called a smiling assassin back in our day, right? Because I was friendly and stuff. But I used to, think about what I did before, Tristan. I'm sitting there edifying someone else's skill set, saying they're better than me. Glenn, and in doing that, I'm better than them.
Glenn, I'm glad I talked to you and we're listening in because what you're showing us is where we'll probably end up if we start tweaked, because this becomes a serious issue if buyers start thinking they can circumvent and go directly to the seller. The listing agent only has a fiduciary to the actual listing seller. And then that's where problems start with multiple offers. Betty, that was a great question.
1,000%. And Tristan, if your guys are well trained in that sort of smiling assassin type scripting, that is where you get seller testimonials with sellers in tier, because that's the next thing. And there's maybe round 2 of this discussion for you and me, Tristan. This means that you need to become the listing agent en masse. Because when you meet these lists, when you're the listing agent and buyers are coming direct to you, guess what they are when they have something to sell? The same buyer that you squeezed for their last $152 becomes your selling client.
Glenn, I don't know why NAR didn't call you to show up to the case, man. It's like, hey, everyone here, the jury, just listen to how it's done in Australia for a minute, okay?
Man, and then be honored to go through round 2, bro.
Oh, shit. Okay, got it. Okay, taking note, Glenn.
Because there's no confusion, Tristan, and that's, I suppose, the thing, is I even know there is confusion historically when there's 2 parties, or even if there's one party trying to double end. How the hell can you differentiate yourself and say, Tristan, I'm going to put more money in your pocket as a seller and kind of say the same thing to the buyer? It can't be done. Where there is no, like when we've got, I've had sellers in tears of gratitude to my clients who saved their financial life by getting them more money using these completely legal tactics. That is the way that law should happen. I don't want a lawyer hoping there's a win for the criminal who is on the other side of the representation. You know, say it's a trial in any other court. When my lawyer is looking after me, I don't want them to be thinking about the best interest of the guy that's going to jail, you know?
That's true. That's true. All right, Glenn, how do people get a hold of you if they have questions, if they want to grab anything on your part?
Yeah, do you want to maybe put it in the chat, or do you want to just activate the screen sharing? Because I've got a link that if they want to, I'm going to help some USA real estate agents. And the way I'm kind of going to pick the ones that want to work with me, and it's going to cost them nothing. It's going to cost them literally like $30.
Gotcha.
If they go to, it's www, and they will have to put in the www.
Wait,
Right?
www.
www.iwantitall. And let me see, what are you seeing there, Tristan? Are you seeing my Facebook or are you seeing my Zoom?
I am seeing your Zoom. If you
Great.
give me
So-
the site, I
Yep.
will. There it is. I
So
want it all.
that's the site, iwantitall.com.au/backdoor. So as you can see, if they see you anywhere online, they have to thank you, because my team weren't happy that we dropped this down to $47, and that's AU, and our dollar's nonsense compared to yours. So it's like 30
Wait, what's that? Glenn, what's the site again? And
iwantitall.com.au/backdoor. There you go.
Okay. Let me.
So that'll get my life's work, like
Gotcha.
thousands of hours of all of this nonsense.
There it is, Bill.
And I'll work with them every week like this to get them up to speed with this. Because really, that's what we should do on step 2 of this, Tristan, is how do you get 20 to 30 listings?
Yeah, I'd like to focus on that. And also, it's very clear that from what you're telling me, buyers are getting screwed over here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, they're getting, they think that they are better negotiators than they are. Thus, they are leaving themselves very vulnerable to people who are actually half decently trained negotiators. And it's the 80-20 rule. You only have to be adequate at that one system, and you are brutally effective out there in a marketplace.
dude, you got that. Thank you so much. Let's do, as the settlement gets decided on by the
yeah.
when they start tweaking and saying, hey, this isn't going to fly, this is, or hey, this is what it looks like. Let's have another one of these, because I'd love to showcase you and then your words.
But even then, I suppose, Tristan, the one thing I would say is, no matter what happens with that settlement, there is never a reason against being the local dominant force who gets all the listings in an area, no matter what, because then you get all the buyers as well, and you're the listing dominant. There is no argument against it. Even historically, you know, if you guys recorded and have available Lab Coat Live from San Diego, they should get that event, buy that off Tristan, and just watch my 2 sessions, because that's all I focus on, is how to get listings. You know?
I agree. All right, let's focus on that. How to get listings from Australia. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
To be continued, Tristan. Thanks, my man.
Continue.